Welcome back to another episode of the Real Football Talk, where we will be discussing the Manchester Derby, where Manchester United ended Manchester City's 28 games unbeaten run in all competition and carried on their fantastic away form of 21 games being unbeaten away. I want to straight kind of jump into the incident happened in the first minute, Hivzo, with regards to the penalty. What on earth was Jesus doing?
Yeah, I've to be fair, I've no idea either. Completely rash. No need to come into Martial from behind him because Martial, he was already surrounded by 4 or 5 City defenders. He's got no space, no time to get shot away. There's absolutely no need for Jesus to come into that rash. So I think it was one of those where stupid decision, rash decision. Player didn't know what he was doing. And I think, in my personal opinion, that first minute, giving that penalty away, more or less changed the direction of the game, in the sense that my opinion or thought or view was, for United to come out and win this game, they would have had to score first, which we'll come into in terms of why. But them going ahead in the first minute, now 1-0, with 90 minutes still left to play, I think did essentially change the direction of the game. So, in short, clear penalty, stupid decision. And basically, I think gave United a massive advantage in terms of going on to get the result and win the game.
Adi, what was your view on the start to the game and how we proceeded from there? Really,
I think. General first games in every match, change the momentum of the game. What I was surprised was really the way in which Jesus reacted in giving away that penalty. Was the way all the Man City players were in that first 10 minutes. They seemed really kind of in a panic mode. They didn't react even in a calm, composed way. It took about after the initial 10 minutes, they started getting to their rhythm. I think that's partly because United could no longer do the high press, so they had to drop back. So,
I think on that point, that was, again, and we've seen it in big games from United before. I think we saw it in the Chelsea game as well, where that first 10-15 minutes, amazing start in terms of off the ball. High press with the front line. Lindelof, Maguire keeping the defensive line high up and pressing City from the off. Proactive in pressing Man City's defence midfielders, winning the ball back, winning multiple different challenges. What I actually found amazing with United's off the ball, and it deteriorated over the course of the game, which I think is somewhat expected when you're playing a team like City, but the first 10-15 minutes, the coordination and the communication of the players from United's off the ball point of view, I thought was immense, in terms of they knew if one of the front three went to press and came out of position, you would automatically see, either Bruno Fernandes, Fred, McTominay drop into a different position. It's hard to describe in words when you're not seeing clips of it. I generally wish we actually had clips of the game to show, but the movement and the patterns in terms of them moving off the ball, where, if one midfielder's compromise their position, you see people like Rashford or Martial actually dropping in to cover their position and pick up the man behind. So I think that like I just said, that probably didn't help City one bit, in that they were probably expecting a much more stable, solid 10-minute start. And City is one of those teams where, when they get into their momentum, they're a very well-oiled machine, but they need to go through the gears, because Pep's philosophy is very much based on a system. It needs to go through the tick boxes and them to go through the gears for them to get to that well-oiled machine stage. And if you can disrupt that system early on, which I think United did well, you've got a good chance of getting a result, which they did as well.
On that, really, sorry, Adu, it seemed like Man City kind of changed the way they've been playing recently. They've kind of gone back to the traditional 4-3-3 with Jesus up front. So what do you make? Did that change impact the game?
Well, what I've noticed is when Jesus plays, they don't actually really change the system because Jesus actually plays like a false nine now. Hence, and the goal kind of the penalty epitomizes that because he's coming deep to create the space for the wingers to get isolated with the fullbacks. So and I don't think it changed. What I noticed changed was just the mindset of the players. I mean, they were rushed, they were panicked. I think they weren't expecting Man United to continue to attack after that penalty. So the next few minutes they had a couple of, and that just put City on the back foot. But the interesting thing was the way in which to combat, especially when United decide to go, and what they did was they retreat to the halfway line, and then they would defend from there. What City really struggled to deal with was getting De Bruyne into the game. And so what he started to do was he started to come deeper and deeper and deeper to the point where he was starting to pick the ball up from the defense, from the defenders. And then even though he's good and he's passing around now the press and he's trying to make things happen, that's one player less in the attacking zone that they used to having. And I just felt more and more, especially with De Bruyne, he started to take more and more touches and the wrong options were being taken. I mean, quite a few times in the first half, Sterling was free. Sterling was free out wide and they kept cutting across the pitch and going down the other side. And I felt they weren't playing as wide as they normally do. And, you know, maybe that's because of the way United was suffocating the spaces that is forcing Mahrez and Sterling slightly more narrow than they used to. But the other thing was also they're just taking too many touches before they sent the pass. And that was mainly De Bruyne was at fault for that. And I can't remember since this run started, at the start of the season, Sterling was playing very narrow. And this was the first game since then where I saw them trying quite a few two balls in behind, where he becomes like the 9 who's trying to stretch the ball in behind. Mm-hmm. And Henderson was, good at reading it coming out of his line. And and that was the thing. United, much like the Chelsea game, played a higher line than they normally do. And I think all these factors maybe surprised City in how adventurous Man United were willing to be, and United struggled to beat City's counter press for long periods, but they still beat it plenty of times, more than most teams have, and I think it's just the makeup of the team, which is, it's a fast team that likes to dribble, and when you dribble and break lines, it's very hard to contain. As much as they normally do, it's very hard to contain.
And the other really interesting observation as well is credit to United's off the ball approach in holding a high line. You could see the number of overhit balls from City on a number of occasions where they've either got an overlap or a through ball where Sterling's trying to stretch the defense, and that's United have pushed up. So they forced City's hand in that they've shown that there's space in behind them, but every single time, a lot of those City balls, if you watch the game, were actually overhit to the extent where they knew if they played it, if there wasn't enough juice or weight on the pass, it's being intercepted or it's not getting to its man. Or secondly, like I said, you've got Dean Henderson coming out and reading the play. So small observation from the game, but I think a really interesting one, and again one that goes to credit United's off the ball work and off the ball strategy during.
I mean, would you put that down to United, or would you say that's actually being caught on the ball?
I think a bit of both. Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I think there's some credit you give to United, but of course at the same time you do have to question some of the City players didn't look on the mark as they have done compared to the last couple of months, where some of the balls were rusty, some of them were overhit. I don't think Sterling particularly had an amazing game. De Bruyne has obviously just come back into the mix as well. So I think it's a combination of both. Some credit to United, but also some fault of City's in that their players just went on it, to be frank.
I put it all down to United. I think United disrupted City's rhythm, not just by the goal, which did affect them, but during the whole game. I mean, they were even when City kept getting the ball back through the counter press. You could tell that the rush in their play was because they couldn't create any opportunities from that. And I thought for all the abuse that he gets today, Maguire was a colossal. I mean, he played like a leader at that back. Every one of those crosses, he's got his head in on. He had the presence about his game and the composure when playing the ball out. And the thing is, what was really also really clever about what United did do in terms of trying to break was most teams, because the way City suffocate you, you end up going either a long out wide or straight to the fullbacks. And then they squeeze the pitch. And what was good about United was they kept keeping the initial pass central, and then going out to Shaw. And they were willing to play with that risk and that thing. And it didn't work every single time. But then what happens is if the ball gets intercepted, at least the player is in position to affect the man who wins the ball. Instead of when you go out wide and you lose it, the player is totally out of the game. So I felt I totally credit United for disrupting City's pattern, City's rhythm. And I don't think the players were that out of form. They looked sharp. They looked really good, especially in the counter press. I mean, City's counter press, every time you watch it, it just amazes you because they are so good at reading those passes and winning it back. But I mean, United really squeezed the pitch with the high line and all the front players coming to the halfway line. There wasn't an awful lot of space to play in.
I mean,
the other reason
on that, really, I wanted to kind of ask about a specific player, really, with regards to Luke Shaw, because when Jose Mourinho was managing, he got a lot of criticism from him in terms of how now he has progressed and now he's contributing with assists and goals. What did you make of the run and the goal he scored, really?
For me personally, really, really good. I genuinely think he's actually, to come back, if you think about it in terms of overall context, to come back from a broken leg and a season and a half or 2 seasons later to be performing at the level he's doing. And some of the stuff he does isn't actually, if you watch it, a lot of the stuff is simple, basic fundamentals in terms of what you might expect from a modern fullback. He knows some of the basics of defending. He knows the basics of overlapping and attacking as a fullback. But the key is he does it consistently. And it shows when his performances rack up game after game. I think I was reading a stat just last week where I think in terms of his forward attacking play, he's created the 3rd most chances in Europe's top 5 leagues. As a left back, as a fullback, he's created the 3rd most chances in Europe's top 5 leagues. So, and that goal today is clearly a sign of him and improving his attacking play. I mean, in terms of the goal itself, great goal. I think drove forward with the ball during the game a number of times, has done that for United a number of times this season. In terms of the finish itself, I thought the finish was great. What I rated more was the first touch. If you look at that first touch, the spin on the ball that he took off from Rashford's pass or layoff onto him, the ball literally sat dead with no movement, no spin, allowing him to connect into the bottom right-hand corner. So, personal opinion, I think he's come on really strong. I think he's taken all the criticism on board. He's clearly worked on it. He's worked on different areas of his game, and I think in all fairness, a lot of credit to him and where he's come to.
Yeah, I think that goal actually highlights what were the positive of what we were saying in the way in which United kind of counteracted or tried to counterattack City's counter pressing, which was go go to the middle first. So what happened was by going to the middle, you end up having Walker in no man's land because they're so used to that. Oh, Cancelo, yeah, because you're so used to seeing that first ball going out wide and them pressing and winning that back straight away. But because he goes into that midfield zone and they set up for the counter press, when you beat that block of 3 players or 4 players who are set up for the counter press, what happens is then they are all looking out of position. And so, yeah, again, great drive, great goal. I actually feel against teams that play with a low block, Shaw and Maguire are part of the problem why United have been struggling to score because of the fact that they dribble too much and they dribble into the space too much without actually shifting the opposition. So it's something definitely against the smaller team. I think even though the stats, individual stats are good, United have been winning those games partly because Maguire and it's a shift. Recently, too much attack has been going down the left and the balance hasn't been right. But today, against one of the bigger teams, this is when you want to see Shaw attacking because the space is there to be attacked and you're shifting defenders around. And that's the whole attack shifted the whole back line of City, that's when you want your fullbacks and your wide players to be really making things happen. So even though the positive for this game, I do actually think is part of the reasons why against a low block team we'll be struggling to create chances is because maybe he's been dribbling too much from deep.
Yeah, agreed. I think same point with Maguire there as well, because the nature of his game is to come out with the ball as a centre back. You know, in some cases where he's coming all the way to halfway line, whereas with low block teams, you need, because they've got a block, you need to be able to pull players out of position in terms of with your passing, your movement. And if you keep coming forward, bear in mind you've got a whole pitch to use. So if you keep coming forward and driving into the space, you're actually eating up a lot of the space that you want to be creating for yourself. So it is, I think it comes to a point where United's on the ball, as great as their off the ball is, I think even in this game it showed, I think their on the ball play, ability, tactics needs a lot of improvement. Which was evident in this game as well, because I mean the number of times where they've won the ball in transition and some of the decision making I thought was absolutely horrendous, you know, in terms of the passes, the through balls, the finishing, the play in the final third. I think some of the decision making from some of the plays was absolutely horrendous, but also from the midfield players, United are really lacking, and maybe this is somewhere for all the criticism he gets, and rightly so. I think, you know, there is some criticism for Pogba, but some of his skills and some of his attributes to some extent could have been helpful in the on-the-ball work where United lacked today in terms of his ball retention, potentially beating the press or the counter press. But again, the obvious thing there is, though, you know, if you with Pogba you play a guy like that in a team like this, you might be compromising on the off the ball work and on the off the ball strategy. But we're speaking in terms of they've played really well off the ball. If they wanted to improve on the ball, some of those areas, I think that they need to get a player or develop some of the existing players to be able to dictate teams, build play, build possession, move opposition players out of their position, create spaces in behind. So yeah, but again, I mean, that could be a completely different strategy. At the moment, they are relying on a counter-attacking strategy, which is working quite well for them in most games anyway. So
I think I wanted to look into how much, because I mean, Ole gets a lot of criticism from United fans, from fans all around the world, really. How much praise does he get? Because his team has won 3 games away at City. He's the first manager in, I think, United history to do that. I mean, surely he is doing something right there, and he deserves all the praise.
So I think what one thing you can't criticize Oli for is the work ethic he's brought into the team. I mean, since he's come in, you know, Pogba gets challenged or sometimes dropped because he might doesn't match the work ethic of the ball. But in terms of intensity of the ball, United have improved dramatically under Oli, and there is a strategy in terms of how they stop teams playing, and they're good at it because they don't, and it's quite adaptable. So he definitely deserves praise for the system in which he manages to find a way to stop opposition teams, and the pressing of opposition teams. But I think United setup, and I said it previously, is they're a team that, because of Oli's philosophy, where he just positions players in the right places to beat the opposition press, and there isn't really an attacking structure. It's just counter-attacking at pace. What that does is, against the bigger teams who will give you that space, it becomes a very useful tool, that philosophy, because of the fact that you can't prepare for a team that doesn't have an identity in how they attack. You're not sure where they're going to attack, where all you're going to know is they're going to counter-attack at pace. So what happens is that gives opposition teams difficult, because they can't read, or they can't plan, or they can't set up position players in any certain way. So today you couldn't tell whether it was going to be Fernandes picking it up, whether it's going to be Rashford picking up the ball from the defense, or Martial, because they position all three like inside tens, and they're rotating it. So then it becomes really difficult for opposition teams. So you have to praise that, all right, this type of football, and I call it lockdown football, where, Oli's recognized fast-paced, unstructured football. I'm hoping once we're away from this, there will be a bit more structure and slightly more of a pattern and identity how United attack. But for now, you have to praise it, because at the end of the day, it's getting the results, it's getting us where we need to be. But it definitely looks better against teams that give United space, and that's generally the better teams. And that's why a lot of United's games have been 0-0. It's not because United have changed the way they played. It's been more the opposition changed the way they play. And I think City certainly did that in the first game at Old Trafford. Today they didn't, and that's because their form was so good, and that's partly why they ended up losing the game. And you can tell the City players scratching their heads, because they couldn't create awful lot of clear-cut chances, even though they dominated the game and dominated the possession. They didn't really ever, it never felt like, okay, they've really found a way to combat this Man United defensive performance, and they never ever really got to grips with the attack. When Man United managed to beat the press, they always got to the edge of the box and created. And again, yeah, Hifso's right. The final ball, I mean, Fred's passing is just scary sometimes to watch a Premiership player pass the way he does. It's ridiculous. But that's what United done. And you have to praise the approach, the positivity of it. How many times was Fred willing to dribble out? How many times was McTominay willing to dribble out? These are things teams don't do against City.
I mean, this is what I wanted to ask. Is this you can say as a form of like a template that has been kind of set for how to be City for other teams? Can other teams follow this similar concept and be City? Is that their problem?
I don't think other teams have that profile where they play without a structure. I think this is unique to United and Oli, and that's why it's equally gets criticized when they can't break down teams, because that's where you need a bit more of a pattern, a bit more of a creativity, a bit more of intelligence to create the space and attack the space. But yeah, it's definitely a strategy in the big games against teams that are looking to dominate the game, press high.
And
It's
you've got space to exploit behind that. I think that one area, and I come back to this point around some of the decision making with United players on the ball was absolutely horrendous today. That genuinely horrendous. And I think there are a number of times when, for instance, when Martial had the ball, you've got two options. You've got James on your right, you've got Rashford on your left. You should go with the guy you know as a player who is likely to finish better or put a chance away. Instead, he goes with James, who, in my opinion, yes, some good attributes, but in terms of finishing, it's not there. Similarly with Rashford, number of opportunities where he could have pulled the trigger, but he's trying to play cute balls where they're just not on. And again, another game where for Fernandes, that final ball, again, questions as to what he's doing. Sometimes I get the feel with Fernandes, he's trying to force a special final assist ball that just isn't there. I don't know if that's because that's what people have come to expect of him and he's thinking he needs to produce that every game, but sometimes keeping it simple, maybe not being the main guy every single time, but potentially allowing others in your team to create opportunities from you playing it simple might be a better approach. But that, on what Adil was saying, that is the most important thing for United going forward, in that I do genuinely agree and think they need to, well, he needs to develop some sort of structure or system to their on-the-ball play. And the reason is because the approach they've got at the moment relies heavily on players with good decision-making skills. And quite frankly, United don't have enough players who have got the football intelligence and the decision-making ability to make that happen. Don't get me wrong, there are some teams where you can take that approach, and you've got players who genuinely have the football intelligence, the decision-making ability, or you've taught them, similar to how Tuchel's approached his teams previously, you've taught them how to navigate complex situations on a pitch. I don't think Ollie's done that, and I also don't think United players have that instinctively or naturally. So it is something they need to improve on. Having said all that, the one thing I would also add to in terms of giving Ollie credit is, in addition to the work ethic, is the genuine team spirit that I actually think he's created across the team, in terms of how he's managed the players, the arrival of and signing of new players, the letting go, releasing, or transfer of other players. This United team, you can see in games, and it shows from their off-the-ball work and unity and cohesiveness, probably has the most amount of team spirit since Fergie left. More than when Mourinho was in charge, more than when Van Gaal was in charge, more than when Moyes was in charge. And, as much criticism as Ollie gets, a lot of that, if not all of the players in that United camp at the moment, there is something to say where they trust him with some of the direction of the club. He's getting them results. They've got a good team spirit. They work for each other off the ball. They rely on each other when they can. The improvement is more technical areas and tactical areas on the ball. So in response to your initial question, yes, I do think he deserves some credit, but at the same time, there are a number of areas that if he wants to take this team forward and achieve more, they need to work on some of those areas.
Thank you, guys. Brilliant Manchester derby win by United, really. Thank you both for your inputs, and I'll hope to see you soon. And guys, do keep an eye out for all the other teams' analysis coming out this weekend and throughout the week. So thank you both.